You know what most gardeners don't realize? November isn't the end of the gardening season. It's actually one of the best times to plant for next year. I remember the first late autumn I decided to sow perennial seeds in November. My neighbor thought I was crazy. The ground's almost frozen, she said. Nothing will grow now. But the following spring, when those seedlings emerged strong and healthy, blooming weeks earlier than anything I'd started indoors, I learned something powerful. Nature has her own perfect timing. And sometimes the secret to an incredible garden isn't working harder, it's working with the seasons. Hi friends, and welcome back to Daily Garden Fix. I'm so happy you're here today. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to our little corner of the gardening world, where we keep things simple, practical, and rooted in what actually works, not just what sounds good in theory. And to my returning garden friends, thank you for coming back week after week. Your comments, your questions, your success stories, they're what make this community so special. Today, we're talking about something I wish I'd learned years earlier. 7 perennials you can sow right now in November that will reward you with beautiful blooms next year. These aren't fussy plants that need babying. These are hardy, reliable perennials that actually prefer to be sown in late fall, and they'll come back year after year once established. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button and ring the bell. We've got so much more coming your way, and I'd love to have you as part of this growing family. Now, let's dig into these incredible perennials. Before we jump into the list, let me explain why November is such a perfect time for sowing perennial seeds. Many perennials actually need a period of cold, what gardeners call cold stratification, to germinate properly. When you sow them in November, Mother Nature does all that work for you over winter. The seeds experience the cold, the moisture, the freeze-thaw cycles, and when spring arrives, they're primed and ready to grow. November planting is especially effective because the ground is cool enough that seeds won't try to germinate prematurely, but it's still workable in most zones. It's gardening the smart way, letting nature be your partner. Number 1, Echinacea, the purple coneflower. Let's start with one of my absolute favorites, Echinacea, commonly known as purple coneflower. If you've ever wanted a plant that's beautiful, tough as nails, and loved by pollinators, this is it. I first sowed Echinacea seeds one November afternoon when the air was crisp and the garden was already looking sleepy. I scattered them in a prepared bed and barely covered them with soil. The ground was cold, and I honestly wasn't sure they'd survive the harsh winter ahead. But come late spring, those little seedlings pushed through like they'd been planning it all along. By midsummer of their second year, I had these gorgeous pink-purple flowers with prominent cone centers that attracted every butterfly and bee in the neighborhood. Here's what makes Echinacea perfect for November sowing. Those seeds absolutely need cold exposure to break dormancy. When you plant them in late fall, you're giving them exactly what they need. The cold November temperatures prevent premature germination, and the winter cold provides the perfect stratification period. Plus, once established, Echinacea is drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, and incredibly low maintenance. When you're sowing in November, choose a spot with full sun and well-drained soil. This is crucial because you don't want seeds sitting in waterlogged soil through winter. Scatter the seeds on the surface and press them gently into the soil. They need light to germinate, so don't bury them deeply. Water them in if the ground is dry, but if you're getting regular November rains, nature will handle the watering. By next spring, you'll see those first seedlings emerge. They'll grow into sturdy plants through their first summer, and the year after that, you'll have a stunning display that'll come back reliably every single year. The best part? Echinacea self-sows, so over time, you'll have more plants without doing anything extra. It's like the garden gift that keeps on giving. Number 2, Rudbeckia, the black-eyed Susan. If Echinacea is the elegant beauty of the border, Rudbeckia, black-eyed Susan, is the cheerful, sunny friend who makes everyone smile. These golden yellow flowers with their dark centers are absolute stopovers, and they're ridiculously easy to grow from seeds sown in November. I'll never forget the first time I grew black-eyed Susans from November sown seeds. I had this bare patch along my fence that just looked sad and dormant. It was a gray November day, the kind when you wonder if spring will ever come again. I sprinkled Rudbeckia seeds there, barely thinking about them through the long winter. Then, the following June, that entire section exploded with golden blooms that lasted for months. It completely transformed the space and lifted my spirits every time I looked at it. What I love about Rudbeckia is how forgiving it is. It tolerates poor soil, handles heat and humidity, deals with cold winters, and doesn't need much fussing. It's the kind of plant that makes you look like a master gardener without really trying. When you sow in November, you're taking advantage of natural cold stratification. The seeds will lie dormant through winter, and November's cold temperatures ensure they won't try to germinate during any late fall warm spells. They'll stay safely dormant until spring conditions are just right, then germinate when the soil warms. They'll grow into sturdy plants that bloom their first year if you're lucky, but definitely by their second season. Here's my method for November sowing. Prepare your soil by loosening it and removing any weeds or debris. If the ground is already getting hard, that's okay, just rough up the surface a bit. Scatter the seeds and lightly rake them in, covering them with just a thin layer of soil, about 1/4 inch. If the ground is dry, water them gently, but if you're getting regular November rains, nature will handle the watering. By next spring, you'll understand why black-eyed Susans are a cottage garden staple. And once they're established, they'll self-sow and naturalize, creating drifts of golden color year after year. They're also fantastic cut flowers, so you can bring that sunshine indoors whenever you want, something particularly welcome after a long cold winter. Number 3, Aquilegia, the columbine. Now, if you want something with a little more delicate charm, let me introduce you to Aquilegia, columbine. These flowers are like little dancing fairies in your garden with their distinctive spurred blooms in shades of purple, paint, white, blue, and yellow. I planted columbine seeds one November in a partially shaded area under my trees where not much else wanted to grow. The ground was cold, leaves were falling, and it felt like a strange time to be planting anything. But I'd read that columbines not only tolerated but actually preferred fall planting, and that they needed cold stratification. November sowing seemed perfect. What I wasn't prepared for was how enchanting they'd be. The following spring, the seedlings emerged, small and delicate at first with distinctive blue-green leaves. By late spring of their second year, these graceful plants were covered in nodding blooms that seemed to float above the foliage. Hummingbirds discovered them immediately, and I'd watch them hovering and diving between the flowers every morning with my coffee. After the long gray winter, those delicate blooms felt like a celebration of life returning. Columbines are perfect for woodland gardens, cottage gardens, or any spot that gets part shade to full sun. They're not picky on soil as long as it drains well, and once established, they're quite drought-tolerant, something you wouldn't expect from such delicate-looking flowers. When sowing in November, scatter the seeds in prepared soil and barely cover them. They need some light to germinate. Press them gently into the soil surface and water them in if conditions are dry. Through the winter, those seeds are getting the cold treatment they absolutely need. November's cold temperatures ensure they won't try to germinate during a warm spell. One thing to know about columbines, they're generally short-lived perennials, lasting about 3 to 4 years. But here's the beautiful part. They self-sow generously. So once you plant them in November, you'll always have columbines in your garden. They'll pop up in unexpected places, creating these lovely surprises each spring. And the color range is incredible. You can start with one variety, and over the years, as they cross-pollinate and self-sow, you'll end up with unique color combinations you won't find anywhere else. It's like your garden is painting its own masterpiece, and it all starts with those seeds you scattered on a cold November day. Number 4, Delphinium, the cottage garden classic. If you've ever dreamed of having those tall, stately flower spikes that you see in English cottage gardens, Delphinium is what you're looking for. These plants produce stunning vertical towers of flowers in the most incredible shades of blue, purple, pink, and white. I'll be honest, I was intimidated by delphiniums at first. They have this reputation for being fussy, difficult, high maintenance. But then I learned that starting them from seed in November actually produces stronger, more resilient plants than starting them indoors in spring. That discovery changed everything for me. The first time I tried it, I sowed delphinium seeds in a well-prepared bed in mid-November. The ground was cold, but still workable. I made sure the soil was rich and well-draining. Delphiniums don't like wet feet, especially through winter. I scattered the seeds, covered them lightly with about 1/4 inch of soil, and watered them in. Then I waited through the long winter. The following spring, as the soil warmed, sturdy seedlings emerged. They didn't bloom that first year, but I was patient. The second year, in early summer, those plants sent up flower spikes that were absolutely breathtaking, deep blue towers that reached 4 to 5 feet tall. Every visitor to my garden stopped and stared at them. And they were noticeably sturdier than the delphiniums my neighbor had started indoors, more resistant to wind, more vigorous, more resilient. Here's why November sowing works so well for delphiniums. Those seeds need cold stratification, and they benefit from the natural moisture cycles of winter. When you sow in November, the cold temperatures prevent any premature germination, and the winter cold provides perfect stratification. When spring arrives, the plants are already acclimated to outdoor conditions, which makes them tougher than indoor-started seedlings that have to adjust to outdoor life. When you're planting in November, choose the spot with full sun and protection from strong winds. Those tall flower spikes can be top-heavy when they mature. Enrich your soil with compost before sowing. Scatter the seeds and cover them with about a 1/4 inch of soil. Water gently if the ground is dry, but if you're getting regular November precipitation, let nature handle it. Now, I'll tell you, delphiniums do appreciate a little extra care once they're growing. They like consistent moisture, they benefit from staking when they get tall, and they appreciate a mid-season feeding. But the reward? Those spectacular flower spikes are worth every bit of attention. And in many climates, they'll bloom twice, once in early summer and again in fall if you deadhead them after the first flush. They're the showstoppers, the statement plants, the ones that make people ask, how did you grow those? And you can smile and tell them it all started with seeds scattered on a cold November day. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. Have you ever tried sowing perennial seeds in late fall or winter? Or have you always stuck to spring planting? And if you could choose just one of the perennials we've talked about so far to add to your garden, which one would it be? The cheerful Rudbeckia, the elegant Echinacea, the enchanting columbine, or the dramatic Delphinium? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely love reading your thoughts and learning about what you're growing in your own gardens. Your experiences help other gardeners in our community, and sometimes your comments give me ideas for future videos. All right, let's continue with 3 more incredible perennials you can sow right now in November. Number 5, Lupine, the bold and beautiful. If you want bold color and architectural interest, lupines are calling your name. These plants produce tall, dense flower spikes in an incredible range of colors. Purples, pinks, blues, whites, yellows, and even bicolors. They're absolutely stunning and surprisingly easy to grow from November sown seeds. I first grew lupines by accident, actually. I had bought a wildflower seed mix that included lupine seeds, and I scattered it in November without really knowing what I was doing. The ground was cold, winter was coming, and I wasn't expecting much. The following spring, these distinctive palm-shaped leaves emerged, and I had no idea what they were. Then, in late spring of their second year, up came these magnificent flower spikes that took my breath away. After the long, cold winter, those bold, colorful spikes felt like nature's way of celebrating the return of warmth and life. Lupines are native to many areas and have become beloved in gardens worldwide. They're particularly famous in places like New Zealand and the Pacific Northwest, where you see entire fields of them, creating landscapes that look almost unreal. Here's what makes lupines perfect for November sowing. The seeds have a hard coat that benefits tremendously from the freeze-thaw cycles of winter. Some gardeners scarify the seeds before planting, lightly scratching the seed coat to help water penetrate, but honestly, if you're planting in November, nature does that work for you. The repeated freezing and thawing through winter naturally breaks down that hard seed coat, allowing moisture to penetrate when spring arrives. Choose a sunny spot with well-draining soil. This is especially important for November planting, because you don't want seeds sitting in waterlogged soil through winter. Lupines have deep taproots, so they don't like to be transplanted once established. Direct sowing in fall is actually ideal. Plant the seeds about a 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. If the ground is already hard, you can simply press them into the surface and cover lightly with soil or compost. Water them in if conditions are dry, but if you're getting regular November precipitation, let nature handle it. Now, I'll tell you, lupines do appreciate a little extra care once they're growing. They like consistent moisture, they benefit from staking when they get tall, and they appreciate a mid-season feeding. But the reward? Those spectacular flower spikes are worth every bit of attention. And in many climates, they'll bloom twice, once in early summer and again in fall if you deadhead them after the first flush. They're the showstoppers, the statement plants, the ones that make people ask, how did you grow those? And you can smile and tell them it all started with seeds scattered on a cold November day.
Number 6. Campanula, the bellflower. If you're looking for something a bit more delicate and charming, Campanula, commonly called bellflower, is a wonderful choice for November sowing. These plants produce masses of bell-shaped flowers, usually in shades of blue, purple, or white, and they're incredibly versatile in the garden. I planted Campanula seeds one November afternoon in a rock garden area where I wanted something that would soften the edges of the stones. The air was cold, my hands were chilly, and part of me wondered if I was wasting my time. I chose a low-growing variety called Campanula carpatica. I scattered the seeds between the rocks, pressed them gently into the soil, and hoped for the best. The following spring, after what felt like an endless winter, tiny seedlings emerged. They grew slowly but steadily through that first season. Then the second year, in early summer, those plants absolutely covered themselves in upward-facing blue bells. It was like someone had scattered blue stars across my rock garden. The transformation from bare rocks to flower-covered stones was incredible. What I love about campanellas is their versatility. There are tall varieties that work beautifully in borders, medium-heighted ones perfect for cottage gardens, and low-growing types ideal for rock gardens, containers, or edging. Most are very hardy and long-lived once established, perfect plants for November sowing. November sowing works wonderfully for Campanula because, like many of our perennials today, the seeds benefit from cold stratification. When you sow them in late fall, they get that natural cold treatment through winter, and they germinate more reliably and vigorously come spring. Here's how to do it. Prepare a weed-free area with good drainage. This is crucial for November planting. Campanellas aren't fussy about soil, but they absolutely don't like to sit in waterlogged soil through winter. Scatter the tiny seeds on the surface. They're very small, so mix them with a little sand if that makes it easier to see where you're planting. Press them gently into the soil, but don't bury them deeply. They need light to germinate. Water gently with a fine spray if conditions are dry, but if you're getting regular November precipitation, let nature handle it. Now, I'll tell you, campanellas do appreciate a little extra care once they're growing. They like consistent moisture, they benefit from staking when they get tall, and they appreciate a mid-season feeding. But the reward? Those spectacular flower spikes are worth every bit of attention. And in many climates, they'll bloom twice, once in early summer and again in fall if you deadhead them after the first flush. They're the showstoppers, the statement plants, the ones that make people ask, how did you grow those? And you can smile and tell them it all started with seeds scattered on a cold November day. Number 7. Digitalis, the foxglove. Let's end our list with one of the most dramatic and beloved cottage garden plants, Digitalis, commonly called foxglove. These plants produce tall spikes of tubular flowers that are absolutely enchanting, usually in shades of pink, purple, white, or apricot. I'll never forget the first time I successfully grew foxgloves from November sown seeds. I had admired them in other people's gardens for years, those tall, stately flower spikes covered in spotted, tubular blooms. They seemed almost magical, like something from a fairy tale garden. So one November, as the days were getting shorter and colder, I prepared a partially shaded bed under a tree and sowed foxglove seeds. They're tiny, almost dust-like, so I mixed them with sand to help them distribute them evenly. I scattered them on the surface, pressed them gently, and watered with the finest mist I could manage. Then, winter arrived, long and cold, and I honestly forgot about them. But the following spring, dozens of tiny seedlings emerged as the soil warmed. They formed these beautiful rosettes of fuzzy leaves that first year. No flowers yet. I kept them watered through the summer, and then the following spring, after another winter, up came the flower spikes. And what flower spikes they were! Tall, some reaching 5 or 6 feet tall, covered from bottom to top with these gorgeous tubular blooms with spotted throats. Bumblebees climbed inside the flowers, and I'd watch them emerge covered in pollen. After 2 winters of waiting, seeing those spectacular blooms was absolutely magical. It felt like the garden was rewarding my patience. Now, here's an important thing
to know about foxgloves. Most are biennials, not true perennials. That means they grow leaves the first year, bloom the second year, and then die. But, and this is important, they self-sow prolifically. Once you have foxgloves, you'll always have foxgloves. They'll scatter their seeds and new plants will come up every year, blooming in rotation. November sowing starts this beautiful cycle. November is actually the perfect time to sow them because the seeds need cold stratification and they also need light to germinate. The cold November temperatures prevent premature germination, and the winter cold provides perfect stratification. Sow them on the surface of weed-free, prepared soil. Press them gently so they make good contact with the soil, but don't cover them. Water with a very fine mist if conditions are dry. Choose a spot with partial shade to full sun depending on your climate. In hot areas, they appreciate afternoon shade. The soil should be rich and moist, but well-draining, especially important for November planting. One crucial note, all parts of foxgloves are toxic if ingested, so plant them away from areas where children or pets might be tempted to nibble. But in terms of garden beauty and pollinator value, they're absolutely unmatched. When those flower spikes appear in late spring or early summer of the second year, your garden will have that classic English cottage garden look that so many of us dream about. And knowing that journey started with seeds scattered on a cold November day makes it all the more special. So there they are, 7 incredible perennials you can sow right now in November. Each one brings something special to the garden, whether it's bold color, delicate charm, or architectural drama. And the best part? By sowing them now, in the quiet, cold days of November, you're working with nature's rhythms instead of against them. Now, before we wrap up, let me share some practical tips specifically for November sowing that'll help you succeed. Tip number 1. Soil preparation in cold weather. November soil can be challenging to work with. It's often cold, sometimes partially frozen, and definitely not as pleasant to dig into as spring soil. But you don't need perfect conditions. Before you sow any of these seeds, remove any debris, dead leaves, or weeds from your planting area. Loosen the top inch or 2 of soil. You don't need to dig deeply. If the ground is very hard, you can simply rough up the surface. If your soil is heavy clay, consider adding a thin layer of compost on top after sowing to improve drainage through winter. Most of these perennials don't like sitting in waterlogged soil, especially through the freeze-thaw cycles of winter. Tip number 2. Mark your planting areas. This is critical. This might seem obvious, but trust me, come spring, after months of snow or rain, you'll have absolutely no idea where you planted seeds. I cannot tell you how many times I've accidentally weeded out seedlings because I forgot I'd planted something there. Use durable plant markers, stones, or even small stakes to mark your seeded areas. Make sure whatever you use will survive winter weather. Your spring self will be so grateful you did this. Tip number 3. Water wisely in November. After you sow and water in your seeds, you can pretty much leave them alone. November typically brings plenty of rain or snow in most climates, and that natural moisture is exactly what your seeds need. Overwatering can actually cause seeds to rot, especially in cold soil. Once you've watered them in after planting, and only if the ground is dry, let nature take over. The winter precipitation will handle everything else. Tip number 4. Don't worry about snow cover. Many new gardeners worry when snow covers their November sown seeds. Don't. Snow is actually wonderful insulation. It protects seeds from extreme temperature swings and provides moisture as it melts. Think of snow as nature's blanket for your seeds. When I see snow covering my November plantings, I actually feel relieved, knowing those seeds are protected and getting exactly what they need. You know, there's something profoundly hopeful about November planting. November can feel like an ending. The garden is dying back, leaves are falling, the world is turning gray and cold. But when you plant perennial seeds in November, you're making a statement against that ending. You're saying, this isn't over. This is a beginning. In a world that's always rushing, always demanding instant results, planting perennial seeds in November is an act of deep faith and patience. You're literally planting seeds that won't show their full glory for a year or more. You're trusting in cycles you can't see, in processes happening beneath frozen ground, in the promise of spring when spring feels impossibly far away. But that's part of the beauty, isn't it? Gardening teaches us to think beyond the immediate. It connects us to cycles larger than our daily routines. When you plant these seeds in November, you're having a conversation with next year's garden, and even the year after that. You're making a promise to your future self that there will be beauty waiting, even though right now the world looks dormant and gray. I think that's one of the reasons I love November sowing so much. It gives me hope during the darkest months.
Even when the garden looks completely dormant, even when snow covers everything, I know that beneath that frozen surface, seeds are waiting. They're going through their necessary cold period, preparing themselves for the moment when conditions are just right. And then when spring finally arrives after the long winter, and those first seedlings push through the soil, it feels like a small miracle. It reminds me that growth isn't always visible, that sometimes the most important work happens quietly beneath the surface in the dark and cold months when nothing seems to be happening. So, there you have it, friends. 7 perennials you can sow right now in November that will reward you with beautiful blooms for years to come. Echinacea with its purple cones and pollinator appeal, Rudbeckia's golden cheerfulness, Aquilegia's delicate fairy-like flowers, Delphinium's dramatic spikes, Lupine's bold architecture, Campanula's charming bells, and Foxglove's cottage-garden magic. Each one brings something special to the garden, and each one is perfectly suited to November sowing. You're not fighting against nature, you're working with her, letting winter do the work of cold stratification, allowing seeds to experience the freeze-thaw cycles they need, letting them germinate when they're naturally ready in spring. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 7 perennials are you most excited to try? Have you grown any of them before? Do you have a favorite that I didn't mention? Have you ever tried November sowing, or will this be your first time? Your experiences and questions help make this community richer, so please share in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, if it gave you the confidence to try November sowing or introduced you to perennials you didn't know about, I'd be so grateful if you'd give it a thumbs up. It helps other gardeners find this information too. And if you're not yet subscribed to Daily Garden Fix, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you're notified whenever we post new videos. We've got so much more coming. Seasonal planting guides, problem-solving tips, design ideas, and all the practical advice you need to create a garden you'll love. And here's something special. If you subscribe and leave a comment telling me which perennial you're going to try first, you'll be entered in our monthly seed giveaway. That's right, we give away packets of perennial seeds to lucky subscribers every month. It's just our way of saying thank you for being part of this community. As we head deeper into the cooler months, as winter approaches, I want to remind you that gardening doesn't stop when the last flower fades. November is actually one of the most powerful times for gardeners who know how to work with the seasons. While others are putting their garden completely to bed and calling it quits until spring, you can be out there planting seeds that will give you a tremendous head start on next year's beauty. There's something profoundly hopeful about November planting. It's an act of optimism, of faith in the future, of trust in natural cycles. In a world that always feels uncertain, especially as we head into the darker months, planting seeds is a way of saying, I believe in tomorrow. I believe in spring. I believe there will be beauty ahead. And isn't that what gardening is really about? Yes, we want beautiful flowers and productive plants, but deeper than that, gardening connects us to something larger, to the rhythms of nature, to the passage of seasons, to the quiet miracle of a tiny seed becoming a magnificent plant. So, go ahead, friends. Bundle up, grab some seeds, prepare a little patch of soil, and plant something beautiful. Your future self, the one who will be wandering the garden next spring and summer, surrounded by blooms you planted this November, will be so grateful you took that cold afternoon to scatter seeds and believe in the future. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for being part of the Daily Garden Fix family. Thank you for being gardeners who understand that the best things in life often require patience, faith, and working with nature's perfect timing. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and remember, every garden begins with a single seed, a little bit of faith, and the courage to plant even when the world looks dormant. Happy November planting, everyone.